Trump visits Flint. At the same time, lawmakers plead for federal funding for the continuing water crisis there. Plus more presidential politics, the debate over Hilary Clinton's health and transparency, some close numbers in Michigan, and Libertarian Gary Johnson goes after voters here. Also coming up on the show, Detroit families bring an unprecedented lawsuit against the state of Michigan over literacy and education. We'll also talk about new development plans in the city and why we're all YOLO about our last segment. We're at the Detroit Historical Museum with Nolan and Steven, and MiWeek starts right now.
Did you know Roush Enterprises was selected by Google to assemble a test fleet of 100 prototype self-driving cars in 2015? It also produced the new Domino's delivery cars. And speaking of Domino's, Domino's sells well over 2 million pizzas per day around the world, and half of their sales are digital. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Funding is also provided by Delta.
Hi there and welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. We're on the road this week at the Detroit Historical Museum on the second floor in the Innovation Gallery with our MiWeek contributors Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. You know, guys, it's always exciting to be on the road and someplace different in the Historical Museum, huh?
It's good to be in Detroit.
Yeah, it's, you know, and it was no shortage of news this week. I can only figure when you guys are working that it's been overtime this week.
There's a lot going on, right? Hilary Clinton's health kicked off the week, right? The health scare on Sunday.
No, it's been a busy week, yeah. It's been an exciting week. I mean, we're right now in the stretch, I guess, of this presidential race. I don't
55
anticipate
days,
it not being busy from here on out.
You know, I figure every time I watch cable news and you see all these reporters and the ones who've been covering the Clinton and the Trump campaigns, I always think, man, they are going to have the longest vacation in November when they are done with all of this, you know?
No, that is really tough duty. Some of those people have been on those buses for almost a year. Right?
All right. And those buses keep circling back to Michigan, so we're going to be talking about that. You know, presidential candidate Donald Trump visited Flint this week, toured the water plant, and gave national attention once again to the ongoing water crisis there. And at the same time, Flint's mayor and Democratic congressional delegation were in Washington trying to push for more federal funding. We're going to talk about the political side of visiting Flint for Trump in just a moment, along with other factors in the presidential race this week that we were talking about. But first, we're coming up on a year since Flint's water system was switched back to Detroit, and residents are still relying on bottled water. So before we get into the political optics of all this, and Stephen, let me start with you on this. We are coming up on a year, and still you have people that are relying on bottled water and on filters and waiting still for the health of the water to be back to where it is, and no one can quite put a date on that.
Well, and the reason is that this is more than just the emergent problem that was identified that put lead in the water. I mean, the long slide into desperation for Flint is about a lot of other things too, and you've got to start fixing those things before I think you're going to get to the place where it's back to even where it was before the water crisis, which of course was not a great place in the first place. I mean, Flint has a lot of inherent problems. It has a lot of problems that you see in other cities in Michigan, but in a more severe fashion. And until we start sort of talking about those things, I think this idea that we can get them back up on their feet is a little bit of a pipe dream.
A little bit of a pipe dream, do you think?
Well, the EPA is saying now, end of the year, they may get back to being able to drink that water without filters. I think there's less reliance on bottled water now as the filters are working to take the lead out. You're not going to get, though, I mean, the safety of the water, I think, will ultimately get to where it needs to be, but I don't know that the trust in the system is going to get where it needs to be until they replace all the lines. Whether they need to replace the lines or not, from a technical aspect, from a trust aspect, you got to dig them up, put new lines in, or people are not going to believe in that water system.
All right, let's talk about what has been called the photo opportunity of Donald Trump coming to Flint. You know, when I heard that he was going to be coming and touring Flint and touring a water plant, I kind of shook my head and I was like, wow, is that the best move for him right now? What do you make of his visit, Stephen?
Well, I mean, it's the only kind of thing he can do to combat the perception among white voters that he's a racist, and that's what this is about. It's really not about voters in Flint. They are never going to vote for Donald Trump, and he knows that. But it is about being seen as empathetic and compassionate toward African American communities in a way that assuages the fears of white voters who increasingly believe that he's not tolerant or accepting of those things.
So do you think that visit yesterday, and as well as the visit that he made then to Detroit and the interview that he gave on that network, do you think that is making ground with people, or no?
I don't know. I mean, I think it gives potential cover to some white voters, but his numbers don't seem to move really regardless of what happens. I mean, he's stuck right at about 40%. I think the question is far more on the other side of the coin. Can Hillary Clinton get enough people to go and cast their votes for her to actually beat him?
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the numbers, Nolan. And we've had a couple of polls come out, a Quinnipiac poll and also CBS, New York Times, that put this race very close. And you have also Trump taking leads in Ohio and in Florida. And the poll out this morning from CBS nationally puts them within the margin of error, I think like a 41%, 39%.
Yeah, but you look at those numbers, it's just as Steve is saying. Trump's not moving. Trump's been locked in that low 40s, 41, 42 throughout the summer, almost throughout this campaign, general election campaign. It's Clinton's numbers that move up and down, and also the third-party candidates gaining some traction. This race is still hers to win or lose. And since the last few weeks have not been good for her. I mean, her number one issue is trust, and everything that's happened over the last couple of weeks have reinforced that we can't trust you message, and it's hurting her. She's dropping, and she's got to figure out a way to pick those numbers up, pick her own numbers up, and she keeps trying to drive Trump's numbers lower. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think his number is going to go lower or higher. He's right at that point where you're not likely to win the presidency with 41% of the vote, but who knows this year. She's got to work on getting the Clinton numbers up and talking about herself and her message, and she just seems obsessed with Donald Trump.
So how big of a deal then this week is the whole issue of Hillary Clinton's health and the fact that she did not disclose that she had pneumonia for a couple of days until it actually caught up with her?
Yeah, well, I mean, it goes to this more general sense of her as not trustworthy or transparent. I don't think the incident itself is that big of a deal, but in the context of a candidate who's trying to repair that bond that you have to have with voters about, are you trustworthy? Are you telling me the truth? Are you telling me everything I need to know? It's damaging, and I think that's part of what you're seeing in these numbers is people saying, well, see, she seems a little shifty about these things. What was the reason to not disclose that? And that always becomes that narrative with the Clintons. Why did you just say what was going on? As both of them have had that problem for 20 years. Now, will she overcome it? I think probably in the end she will. The debates are really the last big national stage for both of these two candidates, and I think she will win those pretty handily, and that'll probably help her over the finish line.
I think she has a chance to win them if she focuses on herself, on her message.
Right. Don't attack him. Right?
Yeah, she gets in a match with Trump, a low-level match with Trump. It's not going to happen, but I agree with Steve. She never seems to tell the truth until she has to, until she gets caught. Friday, why not say? The secretary's being treated for pneumonia. We're not going to be on the campaign trail. People understand you get sick.
People understand that, but do you think that for her that it would maybe show some kind of weakness, or people would pounce on that as some kind of weakness?
No more than it would any other candidate. I mean, I keep hearing this, well, candidates can't do that. If you look at male politicians, I've seen male politicians go into the hospital and their families say, well, he's under surgery, and he's just in a little rough spell. I mean, they all seem obsessed with feeling invulnerable, but would have been better Friday for her to say, I'm going to slow down because I got pneumonia. People understand that. Then to lie about it again, and reinforce this image that you can't tell the truth about anything.
How important are the health records that we're now hearing come out? And my gosh, you know, when Donald Trump, he released his health records to Dr. Oz on the afternoon show, and I think it was a late night comedian who said that Hilary Clinton has been cleared of the entire email scandal by Judge Judy. You know, like, I mean, you hear, this is, you know, an amazing thing, but how really important is this? Or is this just another cycle that it's going to go past in the next week or so?
Well, I think Trump senses that there's an opportunity to sort of show an advantage, right? Well, I'm healthier than she is, and I'll show it, and I don't have any qualms about that. In the end, unless a candidate is genuinely sick with, you know, a grave disease or some long-term issue, I don't think their health records matter all that much. It is interesting to me that this is more of an issue in this campaign than it has been for the last two campaigns. I mean, think about 08 and 12. We didn't really talk about
younger candidates.
The health. You had slightly younger candidates, but you had John McCain.
Well, John McCain's health was an issue throughout the campaign.
And he's always having to confront the health question. But Mitt Romney, who's not that much younger, but seems so vital and sturdy, never confronted any of these questions.
Well, I know, but you know, they didn't pass out on the campaign trail. I think this was all, you know, I don't think it had any useful information for voters. Nobody's going to believe that if those health records showed something dramatic, they were going to be thrown out there for us to see. I think a more meaningful approach, if health is indeed a legitimate campaign issue, would have an independent doctor would have examined these two and pronounced them either fit or not fit. But you're not going to say that.
Well, an independent doctor, is there really?
So then what use of this? Does anybody really believe that they would have revealed anything damaging?
All right, well, so, you know, when I ask you guys each week what we want to talk about on the show, I usually get, sometimes you chime in with a couple of things, and no one really wanted to talk about Gary Johnson, Libertarian Gary Johnson, who was speaking to the Detroit Econ Club this week, and you got a chance to sit down with him. What were your impressions, and in terms of the impact he's going to have on this race, and the fact that he's probably not going to make it to the debate stage?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, he's up to 13% in one poll. He's now in all 50 states on the ballot. I think it's becoming increasingly difficult to keep him off the debate stage, and I think he would be a useful voice on that stage because, I mean, when you got two candidates who are in that 60% range of people saying, I just don't like them and I'd rather have another choice, I think it's imperative to put a third choice out there and let people compare and contrast. He's a solid candidate. He's not wild-eyed crazy. He's got good ideas. He's a free market guy, libertarian, but I would think he'd be a nice contrast to the other two candidates who've been banging on each other all summer. Why not have a new face on the stage?
Well, he's got to have an average, I think, is of 5 polls, and it's got to be about 15%.
That's going to be tough to do in 2 weeks.
It's going to be tough to do, but I still think the fact that he's the first third-party candidate to get on the ballot in 50 states, and given the extraordinary nature of this election, where where the two major party candidates are so unpopular, I think the debate commission should bend here and let him on the stage.
You know, I think it's going to be very interesting because you also have some early voting that's going to take place. So when we talk about things are going to be coming down to election day in November, I mean, you have people who are going to be casting their ballots a heck of a lot earlier than that as well.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, I'm a fan of the idea of expanding the voter base by letting people vote on days other than election day. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense that we say in order to vote, you've got to do it in these hours on this day. At the same time, early voting has pushed things so far back that it's really hard to get all the information out there by the time people are casting their ballots that they should have. It's less true in a presidential race than it is on down ballot races, right? Judges, school boards, all of these other things. I mean, we're still looking into all of that stuff and all those candidates, and it is a massive undertaking. We can't get that into the papers by the time people get these ballots and start sending them back.
So when do you guys do endorsements?
Oh, you know, they'll start soon.
We'll start ours this Sunday, but the really time-consuming ones like school, you know, we have 50-some school board candidates in Detroit. We won't be able to get through that and make the endorsements until mid to late October.
And in Michigan or in Detroit, that's probably the most important race on the ballot.
Absolutely.
And when will the presidential endorsements come out? for you guys?
Not sure.
Not sure yet?
We usually try to wait till that 2 weeks before
Yeah.
People go to the polls.
You want to
So
make sure you
late
don't
October.
get surprised.
Right.
Yeah, you know.
No, that's
October
absolutely right.
surprise.
That's absolutely right. I'm surprised by the number
yeah.
of papers that have come out already
I
and
am too.
endorsed.
Didn't New Hampshire endorse Gary Johnson?
No,
believe-
Virginia, was it the Virginia
Was it-
paper?
The union leader in
Yeah.
Manchester,
In,
New Hampshire.
Oh, they
Yeah.
did, and,
Yeah.
and the Roanoke paper, in Kane's hometown, endorsed.
Oh, is that right?
Endorsed Gary Johnson.
Oh, it's going to get good. All right. Taking a look now at a lawsuit that was filed this week involving Detroit children and education, and it's the first of its kind. The suit is attempting to establish that literacy is a constitutional right. And the Detroit school children and families that are part of this lawsuit claim that Michigan functionally excluded kids from the education system by the disinvestment and the deliberate indifference to Detroit public schools. Now, essentially saying that the state has had control of the district for years, and unsafe building conditions, lack of supplies, and teachers deny kids access to literacy. This is a very interesting look at the law. I'm going to start with you, Stephen. When you saw this, what was your impression?
Well, I mean, if you look at the details in this lawsuit and the things that they are recalling or recounting, you know, it makes you want to throw something. I mean, the conditions in the schools are absolutely unacceptable. Kids are putting up with things that we wouldn't subject anybody to in this country, or shouldn't. And so there's no question that that there are a lot of really valid points being made in that suit. At the same time, this idea that there is a constitutional right to literacy is a real stretch in legal terms. We saw a suit like this come out of Highland Park a few years ago, and the courts turned it away. I would be really surprised if this got further. You got a better legal team here involved, and they'll have some amicus support that I think may make some difference. But it's really hard to find in the federal Constitution the right to literacy, and I think strategy-wise, this might be just a bad play. I mean, why not push the political question in the state about how do we fix what's going wrong with Detroit schools? And I know it's frustrating because Republicans have been in charge and they have no interest in that.
So if it's a legal stretch,
they've
then
been-
what's the point?
They spent a whole lot of money, spent a whole lot of time. Republican administration.
Paying back money that they burned up.
Jennifer Granholm never came to the Detroit public schools. She sent in Robert Bob and walked away. I don't think you can say Rick Snyder hasn't been engaged in Detroit public schools. You can argue about the effectiveness, but you can't say he didn't care and didn't spend a whole lot of time and money.
more
But this
talking about the
lawsuit,
legislature.
legislature came across with a pretty big payout. This group, this pro bono law firm out of California Public Counsel, has been looking for a suit for a long time to take it to the Supreme Court eventually, to get education declared a constitutional right. And I think I agree with Steve in terms of, you know, it's a stretch getting there, but if they're ever going to make the case, certainly Detroit would be a place where a good case could be made. But, you know, the downside of this is should they prevail, then all of a sudden now the courts are in charge of education. It'll be that way all over the country, and, you know, there'll be no sort of balancing of priorities or anything else. It'll be straight, you know, get your checkbook out.
Well, some of the comparisons here are to Brown, right? The case in 1954 that declared segregated schools unconstitutional, and there's a lot of debate about what the effect of that has been, right? At 50, 60 years later, are schools better off? Are they less segregated because of Brown? But there also there was a tremendous ripple effect from that ruling that reached into other areas of society and forced us to confront other issues. If you can get a case like this to the Supreme Court and get the Supreme Court to make this declaration, I think it's less about the courts managing schools than it is that sort of cultural marker that says, all right, now how do we reckon with this idea that literacy is a constitutional right, and that in an awful lot of places we aren't respecting it.
But if you don't get that far, and if you say that the legal argument is a stretch right now, well, you say it's a waste of a lot of time. Is there another end game here? Is there another point that they are making?
So in some other states, you've seen suits that are not identical to this, but similar kinds of claims about leaving kids in urban cities out of educational opportunities. They forced the political question in the Capitol, right? So in Maryland,
and
for
not
instance,
always to good effect.
well, it depends. Some
St.
states
Louis,
it's
good
worked.
example.
Some states it's worked. Some states they've struggled. I don't know that this will have that effect because I think Lansing is so bought off on this issue by one side of the equation that they're not even gonna. They won't entertain any alternatives, and they don't have to because they control the entire legislature. But I think that could be potentially one of the sort of side.
Generally, the only answer that comes out of these lawsuits is flushing more money through really bad schools, and it doesn't change the dynamic, doesn't change the outcome. And Michigan doesn't need a lawsuit here. It needs a cohesive strategy, and that's the
Could
fault
you argue,
for that
though, that
lies
lawsuit,
on all sides of the
could you
equation.
argue, though, that that lawsuit might push them towards that, saying, look,
If they
you
think
do
it
need
was,
that.
in other states, it's when the fear that the lawsuit has a decent chance of prevailing,
Right.
that you get the political question settled. Now, we're a long way from that in this suit, one way or another. I mean, this is going to take a long time to litigate that, but that, I think, might be one of the goals.
All right. Well, we want to let you know about a special MiWeek coming up next Thursday. We're going to be live in Detroit at Cass-Tech, spending a whole hour focusing on education, not just in Detroit schools, but issues across our area. We hope that you join us for MiWeek next Thursday, 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. live. Now it's time for some headlines. We have a lot of stuff going on this week. Development of the old Brewster Projects, a new Shinola Hotel, and the new words that you need to know in the dictionary. I know I said Shinola, and
everybody has a Shinola.
Reflexively, everyone just checked your watch. Do you have one on? Yes,
Somewhere
you do. Yes, you do. We all have one on. All right, but let's start about talking about the City of Detroit revealing plans for the Brewster Projects area and going larger than I think that people initially thought it was going to be. And the interesting part that it's going to be a lot of mixed use and different income levels for housing, which is very important when we've talked about Detroit and making sure that there are different levels of housing for people. Nolan, I'm going to start with you when you saw those plans.
Well, this, if it goes through, and of course there's still a lot of obstacles there. They've got to get the federal funding. They've got, to get a lot of other pieces in place. So, I mean, it's a good plan, but it's just a plan at this point. But it goes a long way to making downtown a residential community, a neighborhood, if you will, along with a business community. And that'll be the first time that's been true, perhaps ever, in downtown Detroit. I mean, even in Detroit's heyday, downtown wasn't necessarily a residential neighborhood. But when you put this in with the other things happening in Brush Park and then down along the East Riverfront and in Corktown, other places, you've got a residential neighborhood downtown, and that changes the whole personality of the city.
Yeah, it changes a lot.
Well, if you put this together with what the Illages are doing across Woodward with
Yes.
the new stadium, they
finally have some linking.
right.
areas.
They plan to have, I think, somewhere on the order of 600 units available when the stadium opens next year. You are starting to create a neighborhood, and that inclusiveness is really important, and that's being driven by the coalition of people who are involved. You have people from lots of different corners of this community who are participating in the development, and they're all sort of focused on, well, it can't just be for one group of Detroiters, it's got to be for lots of different people to be successful and to sort of raise the level of quality of life for people who live here.
But it's market driven. I mean, this isn't some government master plan to come out of City Hall. There is a huge demand for housing in Detroit, and particularly in and near downtown, and these developers are responding to it. Now, it does come with a degree of public money, but it's not public planning.
Well, there's a demand for housing up and down the economic scale. What we've seen is development at the upper end and not so much in the middle or on the low end, and this seems to be trying to address that.
Boutique Hotel, Shinola, going to open it up. Again, capitalizing, I think, on the brand that they've been able to stretch now
I have
around
several
the world.
of the watches. I'll probably
Exactly,
go stay at the hotel.
as more of a lifestyle and a cool factor.
Get a discounted room.
I should.
You should get a discounted room. No, I think just kind of stretching what they're kind of capitalizing on, the cool factor of Detroit, and having that kind of I think, boutique experience downtown, filling a little bit of a void.
Been a number of these little boutique hotels that are coming up. The one in the old fire station, the Wurlitzer building. Now this one, it helps Detroit build a critical mass of hotel rooms, which really we haven't grown hotel rooms that much. And if we're going to become a convention city, a city that attracts large crowds, that you need a lot of hotel rooms, and these boutique hotel rooms fill a niche.
All right, you'll be the first one on the list. You'll be like, I have all these watches. Why can't I get a room?
Let me in.
All right, last thing tonight. Some of the new words going in the dictionary. YOLO, do you know what that means? Nolan?
It doesn't sound like a word I've ever
You
said.
only live once.
You would say that
which
all
is
the
different
time.
from FOMO, which
would
is fear
say-
of missing out.
I would say you're only old once.
Right, YOLO. Also, the
That's-
other thing in there, America. That's America.
I don't
I'm
like
And,
not in favor of that one.
And squee, which is like
What is it?
excitement. Squee.
Oh,
Squee.
hell.
Whatever.
Great. So I'm glad I'm bringing
Don't
you
say
into the
that
now.
ever
That's,
again.
that's what the kids are talking about, Nolan, and that's going to do it for my week. Thanks for joining us. Remember, we are live next week for a full hour on education. We hope you'll join us for that. Thanks to the folks at the Detroit Historical Museum for having us here. We loved it, and thanks for supporting Detroit Public Television. We couldn't do this show without you. I'm Christy McDonald. We'll see you next time for my week. Take care.
Did you know? Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago. In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Funding is also provided by Delta.